Hi, my name is Yulia, and hopefully you're excited to see me again. Or I'm gonna hypnotize you to be excited to see me again. Now that you are, this is the News Brief, and here we catch up with 4 to 6 news stories every other day based on what I find, in my humble opinion, to be the most relevant today. Then we discuss it together in the comments, so I don't have to suffer alone and you don't have to suffer alone. And as always, please don't forget to leave your comments, questions, and suggestions under this video so we can continue to tailor this segment to your curiosities. Let's get it. So, good morning, or if you are in Ukraine, then not so good morning, provided that I personally am in Kyiv and I spent it in the bomb shelter with my 2 dogs and my friend who is visiting. Why? Because, well, the air raid started at about 3 a.m. and at about 8:45 we started getting missiles in our airspace. I personally heard about 9 explosions. Yeah, I usually count them. And I usually hear them very well because I unfortunately live on the 15th floor. At the time of the recording of this segment, we do not know how many missiles, drones, and other means of terror Russia used in our country today, but we do know that this was one of the largest combined attacks that Russia has unleashed on Ukraine to date. It's estimated that there were about 50 drones and, at the very least, 6 to 8 Tu aircraft. Each can carry about 6 missiles. Anyways, we are alive and that's all that matters. Who needs sleep anyway? It's overrated. And so is electricity, apparently, because what we also do know is that Russia struck critical infrastructure. Because at some point during this mass air attack, the light in my building went off, and in most of my friends' buildings, and in most of the buildings around me and my friends. So yeah, safe to say most of Kyiv is without power right now. Fantastic. Here is what we also know. Russian forces attacked energy infrastructure across 15 regions of Ukraine, according to Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. He reported that the enemy used drones, cruise missiles, and Kinzhal missiles. The attack resulted in both casualties and injuries. Energy facilities in several regions were damaged, prompting Ukrenergo to implement emergency power outages. Regional military administration are prepared to deploy points of invincibility as needed. Points of invincibility were very popular during rolling blackouts 2 years ago when the full-scale invasion had just started and many people did not have EcoFlows and other means of, powering your apartment or your house like solar. And provided that they are talking about these, which are basically these on-the-go stations where you can charge your phone, charge all of your devices, and sort of get electric, it looks like things are really bad. Because there have been plenty of rolling blackouts and there have been plenty of electricity cuts, and we haven't heard about these for a while now. So I'm expecting that we're not going to have power for a while, unfortunately. 4 people were injured in Odessa, including a 10-year-old boy. 3 of the victims, including the child, were hospitalized in moderate condition, according to Oleg Kipr, head of the State Administration of Ukraine. Kipr stated that the terrorists targeted the region's energy and civilian infrastructure. Debris from the rockets damaged private homes and numerous vehicles. There are also power supply disruptions in the Odessa district. There are also power supply disruptions all over Ukraine. My family lives in Lviv, and so is the family of my friend who is staying with me, and both confirmed that there is no electricity and there are emergency blackouts indeed. And of course, because I don't want to talk only about bad news, it wouldn't be me and it wouldn't be the news brief if I did not show you something really cool and something mood lifting. So you know who is having a really good day following these attacks? This guy. Yep, you are not seeing things. This Ukrainian defender in the Zakarpattia region, where, by the way, nothing usually happens because it's very, very far away from Russia and very, very close to Hungary and Romania, took down a missile. Yeah, a missile with a machine gun. I mean, the joke would be that nothing ever happens there so much that these guys probably saw this missile and were like, oh my God, our time to shine. And shine they did, because look at that. It quite insane, to be honest. But on the other side, we still have some really, really tragic news to cover. This weekend, yesterday, Russia attacked Kramatorsk, specifically a hotel in Kramatorsk overnight, injuring 3 journalists, some of which were American and some were British. According to regional military administration, 2 people were injured, and another is still trapped under the rubble. A nearby high-rise building was also damaged. All 3 victims are journalists, citizens of Ukraine, the US, and Great Britain. However, Russian forces claimed that the building housed a temporary deployment point for the Foreign Legion. It didn't. Russia systematically targets hotels, cafes, and other places where foreigners, especially foreign journalists, especially foreign, tend to stay, because nothing makes the news as much as foreign journalists and foreign volunteers dying in Ukraine. Emergency workers rescued a person from the rubble of a hotel destroyed by Russian forces in Kramatorsk, according to emergency services. The attack carried out overnight with Iskander-M missiles partially destroyed the 2-story hotel. 2 people were injured in the shelling. Emergency personnel rescued 1 person from the hotel's 2nd floor. Preliminary reports suggest 1 more person may be still trapped under the debris. Search and rescue operations were ongoing as of yesterday, with 60 tons of building materials already cleared. In Kramatorsk, the body of a deceased individual mentioned above was found under the rubble of the hotel targeted by Russian forces today, according to Alexander Honcharenko, head of the city's military administration. The identity of the victim has not yet been confirmed. Earlier, Reuters reported that one of its journalists who was at the hotel could not be reached. So it's probably safe to say that it was a Reuters reporter, but of course we don't know as of right now. And as if that attack wasn't evil enough, Russia also did this. They targeted a car with an FPV drone while it was evacuating people from Ukraine's Pokrovsk district, according to the Donetsk State Emergency Service. Pokrovsk right now is one of the hottest areas of the front line. People are being mass evacuated from their houses and sent to safer spaces in Ukraine because, well, the Russian military is encroaching and there is active warfare going on there. At the time of the attack, 2 rescuers, a policeman, and 4 civilians, including an 8-year-old child, were inside the vehicle. Fortunately, no one was injured, though the armored car sustained damage. You know, when I hear about children being stuck in the crossfire of these things, I think of this one book. It's called Crayons. It's a play on words with crayons, and it's a book created in Ukraine and translated into English, so it's a book at the same time in both English and Ukrainian, so you don't have to buy 2 different versions. A friend of mine translated this book, and it's a book of children's stories that are very adult-like, and the full book is filled with drawings pertaining to a specific child who's narrating their experience and their photos of keepsakes and stuff like that. And all of these children talk about loss. They talk about being stuck under Russian mortar. They talk about Mariupol. They talk about all of these things. And it's horrifying. Truly, I don't think we pay enough attention to stories told by me of other people. But I hope that more people are going to be paying attention if they see these stories being represented by those kids with their drawings in their own words. And maybe that'll hit the chord for someone who, doesn't have a lot of compassion. It's attacks like these and everything else that we're going to talk about in this episode that make Ukrainians absolutely unwilling to cut Russia any slack in negotiations. President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine is not willing to sacrifice its territories or people as part of any proposed path to peace. He emphasized the need for concrete diplomatic steps, but made it clear that these should not come at the cost of 30% of Ukraine's land or its population. The president noted that while various experts are making statements about how to end the war, none of them have presented a concrete plan. And that's a really big problem because we keep hearing that Ukraine needs to have, peace. Ukraine needs to go in a peace deal. Why is it that we say Ukraine needs to? Yeah, Ukraine deserves peace. But Ukraine is the victim here. Russia needs to take its military out of Ukraine. Russia needs to bring peace. Russia needs to stop the war, not Ukraine. And the war is not going to be stopped, and no one's lives are going to be any better if Russia doesn't sacrifice, while we are asking Ukraine to sacrifice. And also remember, when you talk about territories are people, not just land. Which is why, in order for us to liberate our territories, the ability to strike targets deep inside Russia is crucial for Ukraine. And the ISW agrees. ISW estimates that Russia has at least 250 military and paramilitary facilities within the range of ATACMS missiles. However, the U.S. currently restricts Ukraine from using these missiles to target military sites in Russia. Of the 250 facilities, only 17 are airfields, making it unlikely that the Russian military has fully redeployed from the remaining 233 sites. Many of these 233 sites are significant military bases, communication stations, logistic hubs, repair shops, fuel and ammunition depots, and permanent headquarters. Experts highlight that Ukraine's recent successful strikes on Russian military facilities achieved with precision weapons of its own production underscore the country's need for long-range attacks. Lifting U.S. restrictions on ATACMS could help meet this demand. And it's so important, and I'm going to stress this again, letting Ukraine strike inside of Russia is letting Ukraine defend itself from the missile attacks that we experience every so often, like today. Can you imagine starting your morning at 8:30 a.m. or even 3 a.m. when the air raids started with going to the bomb shelter instead of making a coffee and trying to figure out what it is that's flying onto you right now and hearing explosions outside of your window or above you all the time? Can you imagine that? Because I don't have to imagine that. I experience that, along with millions of other Ukrainians. The Washington Post says Ukraine crosses Putin's red lines again, and he blinks. Kyiv's rapid invasion of the Kursk region in western Russia this month crossed what was once considered an unbreakable red line, a direct ground assault on Russia itself. However, Putin's reaction has been surprisingly passive and restrained, a notable departure from the strong rhetoric he used at the start of the war. Isn't his reaction what the West is scared of in terms of not giving us the permission to use weapons? We've crossed every single one of his red lines and nothing has happened because Russia is a paper tiger. Let us strike inside of Russia. This has led some in the West to question Washington's approach to the conflict in Ukraine. Critics argue that the slow and measured delivery of arms to Kyiv aimed at preventing an escalation with Russia has instead hampered Ukraine's chances of defeating Russia and prolonged a devastating war of attrition. Thank you. For some reason, when Ukrainians say that, no one's listening, but when a bunch of Western experts say that, people suddenly start opening their ears. Many analysts believe that U.S. military aid to Ukraine had the potential to be a powerful example of support, but it has remained overly cautious. Seconded, thirded. That's correct, except I wish that we came to that conclusion way earlier, because by now we could have been able to end this war, in fact, and end Ukrainian suffering. And since we started this morning with a warm post-Independence Day greeting from Russia, I feel like it is a great opportunity to talk about the misunderstood, mysterious Russian soul that so many people in the West like to protect so much. I found a quote online, and it really resonated with me. The quote goes like this: Russia acts like it's the empire that it aspires to be but isn't. The West acts like Russia is the empire that it no longer is. It's interesting, because Russians see themselves as these successful people that they really are not, and the West sees Russia as this successful, powerful institution that it also no longer is. So why don't we take that veil off and start treating Russia like Russia, a paper tiger? But anyways, back to the Russian soul. There have been multiple polls and studies that have been done about Russia's real attitudes that will help you understand the mysterious Russian soul. And there is a user on Twitter, and you will see their tweets in a second, that summarized all of these studies for all of us so we don't have to read them. And here it goes. For the sake of better understanding the inner workings of the mysterious Russian soul, I've compiled a long list of polls which, put together, make for a rather compelling image, one that I hope will dismiss the idea of the silent majority of the good Russian people that are just scared to speak out. While apparently a lot of people in Africa still hold somewhat of a positive view of Russia, less than 1 in 10 Russians would even conceive having someone from Africa as a family member, neighbor, friend, co-worker, or all around go as far as to see them as a human being. When it comes to the Central Asian migrants, I presume those minuscule percentages of the good Russian people willing to see them as more than slaves are the Russian people of Central Asian origin. Despite the claims of various academics and the Russian opposition of a silent majority of Russians that feel something even remotely close to compassion or sympathy for Ukrainians, these surveys spanning across the past 6 years paint a very different picture. It turns out the self-appointed champions and crusaders of the denazification view Jewish people strikingly similar to how 1930s Germany did. Being a Russian ally and keeping the Russian economy alive didn't seem to have made that much of a difference to how the good citizens of Russia see the Chinese people. Only about 30% of the good Christians of Russia would have an issue with the capital punishment, with the rest either not caring or being in favor of it, despite fully knowing just what kind of justice system Russia has. While it's widely claimed the young Russians are different given they aren't as touched by the regime propaganda, it turns out they're the least likely Russians to actually have an issue with torture. While this particular poll does probably have some bias, do notice how many choose a wholeheartedly, definitely yes instead of just a yes. While bombing children's hospitals and obliterating everything in their path in Ukraine at the price of about 1,000 of their own people a day, the good Russian people are about as bothered by the war as they are about rising retirement age. When looking at the reason given by those Russians who would leave Russia if they could, it becomes rather hard to believe the image painted by the Russian opposition of the good Russian people that are lied to about the West. Because when they talk about traditional values, they probably mean hypocrisy. Your average Russian would rather choose a woke, decadent, and collapsing Western democracy to move to instead of their Chinese BRICS overlord and champion. While for the most part, the pro-Palestine activists seem to somewhat gravitate towards Russia, Russians at best do not care about Palestine and never did. In the spirit of making it harder for your average Russian propagandist to label everything in this thread as Western lies and manipulations, all the polls listed here are done by Levada Center, a Russian polling institute fairly well tied to the Russian state. I also always get these questions about, what was the demographic size? What was the demographic? What was the size of the polling pool? And you know what? It really doesn't matter, because you do not need to make sure that these polls were taken from many, many people to know that they are true. You can go to Russia and you can talk to people. You can go talk to an average Russian in America or Canada and ask them what they think about Black people or Chinese people, and you will know, because they do not hide their attitudes no matter how long they have lived in Western countries. You also can just go on VK, which is Russian Facebook, and get a sample size of most of the population, and you will see what their ideas are like. Also, all of us in the post-Soviet satellite countries know that this is true because, first of all, we've met many, many Russians in our life. And second of all, because all of this was being imposed onto us through Russian TV. And I mean like their regular programs, their, super racist jokes in their reality TV and their shows that were inevitably played in all of these countries because Russia wanted to, control us. So we know exactly what their attitudes are like. You can also look at Russian ads for apartments that say only white people, and those were normal. Those were so normal. Russian Nazi marches, white supremacy marches, the marches against the people of Caucasus, which are apparently not Russian yet for some reason, they have a Russian citizenship, and Russia has invaded their home and colonized it. Yeah. These surveys are accurate, and you can see that based on talking to an average Russian you can pull off the street. And this makes for a great seg to Pavel Durov and his arrest. Pavel Durov is the founder of VK, aka Russian Facebook, that he was ousted from and exiled, and now is such a oppositioner to the Russian government, and the Russian government hates him so much. Or do they? He's also the founder of Telegram, a messenger that has been one of the most important and largest communication tools in Europe, Ukraine, and Russia. So he got arrested, and people are outraged because they think he got arrested because he's Russian. But let's recap how much of a good Russian he is and why he really was arrested. Durov's arrest can be compared to the hacking of Enigma by the British during the Second World War. Telegram is the only messenger that is actively used by the Russian army, says Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Central Security Service at NSDC. Thanks to Durov's case, the entire Russian intelligence network in Europe may collapse, Kovalenko believes. And I found this analysis on Twitter that I consider to be very, very, very good, and I'm going to read it to you. But before you say Twitter is not a real information source, oh my god, I know, but this is not the point. This is a compilation of facts, and from these facts you can derive your own conclusions. Pavel Durov was arrested. Here's what this means for the US, the EU, Ukraine, and Russia from the perspective of a Ukrainian-US tech entrepreneur who's been covering Telegram's Kremlin connections and security holes for the last 15 months. The detention and search warrant was issued because Durov did not cooperate with French security forces and did not properly moderate Telegram, which makes him an accomplice in crimes such as drug trafficking, terrorism, money laundering, child abuse, and etc. I was following Durov's story for the last 17 years, more or less, since the early days of VK. First as a VK user in Ukraine in 2007, then as a tech entrepreneur in the US and Ukraine from 2012 to 2022. Finally, as a volunteer investigator since about 2023. What we're seeing now is a sharply negative reaction from the right-wing X-users, starting with Elon Musk and Tucker Carlson, who are joined by Kim.com, Covertate, and others, demanding to free Pavel and stop censoring the free speech. However, they all fail to mention the allegations against Pavel and how serious they are. He never complied with the content moderation rules, allowing arms trafficking, illegal drugs, human trafficking, and wars to flourish on the platform, using UAE jurisdiction as a safe haven. Basically, Telegram has been the dark web, but open access to anyone who tries. But open access to anyone who wants to go there. As TF1 reports, French authorities are checking Durov's possible connections with the Kremlin. Also this: Pavel Durov is a French citizen and is not subject to exchange or extradition. Wah, 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 wah. Sad. And on this topic, we have a collection of selected investigative pieces on kremlingram.org, a nonprofit studying Telegram's security and its potential ties to the Kremlin, and there is more behind the hood. While there is no smoking gun proving Durov does what Putin wants, there are plenty, 50 plus, of indirect pieces of evidence pointing towards numerous connections, despite Telegram's and Durov's public denial of such. We have also shown that Telegram has people in Russia doing work for them. Whether they call them employees or not, most of TG's revenues come from Russia. They have Russian bondholders, among which many of Russia's top oligarchs and Putin's pals. Media often cite a story of Durov's own telling that he was exiled from Russia for allegedly refusing to provide data on Ukrainian users to the Russian government in 2013. We have reasons to believe this might be no more than a cover-up story. The same goes for the alleged blocking attempt of Telegram in Russia in 2018, which supposedly failed, whereas government less tech-savvy than Russia were able to block it. 2018 might have been the best marketing campaign for a messenger ever, so I'd ask reporters to use allegedly or similar wording whenever they tell those stories. So if you want to see the full thread, obviously you can find it through these screenshots because it is a very long one. But I think what I've told you so far is enough information to understand that, first of all, Pavel Durov can freely come and go from Russia. Telegram is allowed in Russia, while Signal, Viber, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, everything is blocked. So why would Telegram be allowed if it's, this messenger of Pavel Durov who was exiled and Russian authorities don't trust him? Yeah, that doesn't track, right? But you know what also doesn't track? The fact that both the Russian government and the Russian opposition are rallying behind Pavel Durov and saying that his arrest is, a political witch hunt. Why would the Russian government be standing up for Durov if he's such a renegade? Yeah, that tells you everything you need to know. But anyways, now that we've got this covered, let's not forget that the Western equivalent of Telegram and its security faux pas is X, formerly known as Twitter. Elon Musk bought it. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Pavel Durov before we jump into X. As you already know, Russian entrepreneur Pavel Durov was arrested in France. Interesting to note is that Durov flew to France from Baku, Azerbaijan, where Putin was also present at the same time. Putin's press service reported that Durov allegedly wanted to meet with Putin, but he refused. Sure, we have all the reason to trust them on this. I wonder what the French special services can learn from him. After all, either Durov is obnoxiously naive and doesn't realize that Telegram not only facilitates the spread of criminal groups, but also groups aimed at disseminating disinformation and propaganda capable of influencing political events around the world, or he's doing this consciously with the support of Russian special services. And that's where Musk comes in. Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter, now X, involved financial backing from the venture capital firm 8VC, which employs the sons of Russian oligarchs Pyotr Avin and Vadim Moskovich. Both of these oligarchs are sanctioned due to their ties to the Kremlin. Surprise, surprise, Elon Musk took Russian money? Huh. To help you understand, Pyotr Avin is one of the oligarchs very close to Putin. Their connections go back to the 1990s. How romantic. In the fall and winter of 1991-1992, St. Petersburg was left without food supplies. At that time, the Russian authorities allocated quotas for St. Petersburg for timber, metals, and other state-owned goods to be exchanged for food products abroad. And, to put it very briefly, the licenses for exporting raw materials were issued by St. Petersburg Committee for Foreign Economic Relations, meaning by its head, Putin. And the goods with these licenses were sent abroad, but the food supplies never arrived. In other words, Putin was simply selling off Russian assets and enriching himself. Overall, these contracts involved millions, tens of millions of dollars in profit. This matter was handled not only by Putin, but also Sobchak. You've heard that last name somewhere. Not Sobchak, the Russian opposition leader. Sobchak, her dad, who was Putin's great pal, who also, arguably, potentially, might have killed him off. But I digress. The mayor of St. Petersburg and his circle of people. When all of this became known and a scandal nearly erupted, Pyotr Avin, who is now commonly referred to as the oligarch from the Alpha Group, being the Minister of Foreign Economic Relations of Russia at the time, issued an order transferring the functions of the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Economic Relations for St. Petersburg to Vladimir Putin. This appointment saved Putin from possible involvement in a serious investigation. So Elon Musk, same Elon Musk that keeps saying that Ukraine should, basically capitulate, that, Ukraine should stop fighting Russia and just accept whatever it is because it's just a futile war. Elon Musk that publicly supports Donald Trump and all of the other people that spew Russian propaganda. Elon Musk that helps Russian propaganda flourish on Twitter. Elon Musk that doesn't moderate Twitter specifically so these narratives keep spreading. Elon Musk that helped organize, protests worldwide through X because of non-moderation of violence. Elon Musk that turned off Starlinks for use in Ukraine at a very critical moment. Elon Musk that constantly repeats narratives that are favorable to Putin. Bought X with Russian money? Wow. I never would have thought. What? But of course, there is a possibility that the sons of these oligarchs really have no connections to their fathers and absolutely do not participate in any of their agenda. Yeah. There's always that possibility, right? Because there is not enough evidence to point the other way based on what has happened to X since its acquisition. And the fact that Elon Musk never admitted that there was Russian money involved in buying the platform until he had to because he was subpoenaed. Very, very odd. full of oddities, I tell you. Unfortunately, this is the note on which I have to say goodbye to you today because that's all I have, but I will be researching this situation further and keeping my eyes peeled for new information on both the cases of Pavel Durov and Elon Musk because, of course, this is just the beginning. Anyways, if you enjoyed this news report and you would like to see more of them, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, The Gaze, G-A-Z-E, and turn on all of your notifications. Also, do me a favor and send this video to a friend so it has an easier time traveling the World Wide Web and being shown to more people who could find this information useful. And also, like this video and comment on it. And I will see you next time on Friday. So until then.